Hello, this is Demon Phoenix with the next video in my Deathmarch walkthrough. This time we're doing Hearts of Stone, third part, and this is the Scenes from a Marriage quest. Now this quest has quite a lot of interesting dialogue and a few interesting things going on it, but it also has a few of the more difficult fights in the game. As we said before, Hearts of Stone really ramps up the difficulty. Now one of them in particular is an extremely difficult fight and has a very interesting achievement for it, where you can fight all of Olgierd's shadows at once. I'm going to be spending a good amount of time on that fight. But first of all, the first thing you have to do in the quest is when you are fighting this Caretaker enemy, and although we can use the right amount of skills and the right oils to reduce the damage that he does, you still have to be wary of the fact that he will recover an absolute ton of health even if he's not hurting you when he hits you. So it can be a little bit frustrating, so we're going to try and put him down as quickly as possible. Now he is a relic, so you want to use relic oil against him, and then you can use your normal decoctions. So we've got the Water Hag decoction, Ekimara and Arakas, same as ever, and trying to keep the inventory as low as possible before we go into this fight. Before you start this mission, you also want to make sure that you have one of the armors that has high slashing resistance. So I've got the Ziriel armor from beating Opernicus in the Oxenfurt monster contract, which is a level 35 contract where you fight an Arch Griffin and you get a special armor from him. But you can just as easily use the Unvic DLC armor, even though it's the level 16 version with its high slashing damage. That should be absolutely fine. So as you can see here, with the relic oil, protective coating and Arakas decoction, the Caretaker won't do any damage. But what you do have to be wary of is, like I say, even if you try and inflict him with Dimeritium bomb or anything like that, he can recover absolutely tons of health. So there you see I've got him almost down. He has an attack where if you're very close to him, he will knock you down. And after you've done a certain amount of damage to him, he'll knock you back, and then he will summon a lot of zombie enemies which he will kill, and that gains his health back. So you can see here that he gains a lot back from it, and every time you try and stay close to him, he will knock you back. So it can be a bit of an annoying fight, even though he can't really do damage to you, and you can do a lot of damage to him. So what you have to do is try and take as many of these zombies out as you can, or just try and kill him so quickly that he can't even get round to hitting them. So you see here I take most of them out before they get close to him. There's one hidden behind that tree which he manages to hit and get all of his health back. If he does get his health back, it's no big deal. You can just hit him like normal, and one of the good things to be able to do is to hit him with Rend, and because we've got Severance on our Silver Sword, you can actually hit him outside of the range that he can hit you, and also outside of the range where he will knock you back with his attack there. So if you try and use Whirl or normal attacks like that, he'll knock you back. But as you can see, you can just keep your distance and then hit him with Rend using Severance, and that can put him down very quickly. If he's doing his normal series of attacks, you can often get Whirl in because his attacks won't break the Quen Shield because of Protective Coating and the Arakas decoction, and so you can take him out. And you make sure that after you take him out, you pick up his Spade, which is a unique weapon, and it's not a sword, so unfortunately you can't enchant it or put glyphs in, but it recovers vitality when you attack people, and it's unique, so you might as well pick it up. When you're going into the mansion, you will have to fight the Wraith in the painting, and again, if you're not prepared for it, this can be a very difficult fight, but as long as you've got the right setup, which we will do, it's not that difficult at all. So you get your Spectre Oil and whichever of the armors that you're carrying for reducing your damage taken from elemental attacks. So here I've got the Ursine armor trousers, mastercrafted Ursine trousers, and still just the enhanced cat gear, because all I carry that for is the elemental resistance, and the version of it I've got, the enhanced, is high enough to be able to reduce the damage from Wraith, so that's no problem. Now after you've dealt a certain amount of damage, the Wraith will try and get to one of those paintings, and that recovers all of its health as well. You're sensing a theme there. But you can just destroy the painting straight away, so as soon as the Wraith disappears and tries to head for the painting, you just head for the next painting and destroy it so it can't recover its health, and then just proceed to knock out the Wraith the same as on any other enemy. So you can see here it's not even breaking Quen, because again this time it does elemental damage, and we've got that elemental resistance. Now before you go and do the next part of the story, there is something that you want to pick up, which is again another unique item to the Hearts of Stone and to this mission in particular, which is the Ornate Robe. Now this is an armor, and it has a decent set of resistances, but it is a really good looking armor, so aesthetically it's a really interesting armor, and I always like to pick this one up. This one does have good elemental. It's a 26% elemental resistance, so from this point on until I can get the Viper armor, I actually just tend to carry this instead of the Feline Enhanced until I can get some of the higher level armors with even higher elemental resistance, because it's a really good looking armor as well as it having decent resistances overall. So you can see here, it's cool looking armor, and it's just an interesting one to pick up. So make sure you grab that before you progress this mission. After you progress the next part of the missions, this is where you have to face Iris von Everec's greatest nightmare. Now this is an extremely difficult fight and is one of the most difficult in the game, especially if you leave the enemy upscaling on and you leave it on the deathmatch difficulty. Now there is an achievement which is for triggering and fighting all of the ghosts at once. Now the ghosts fight like Olgierd, and they start off, they're one at a time and the others are frozen. Every time you defeat one, another one would start to fight you. And they get gradually and gradually harder to fight, and they fight more and more like Olgierd when you fought him at the start of Hearts of Stone, in terms of the style and the attacks, parrying your own attacks, and they end up doing absolutely tons of damage. Now the thing about these enemies are, they do slashing type damage, which is the same as Olgierd does himself, but they're actually wraiths, so they're not doing elemental damage even though they're wraith enemies, and what that means is that you have to use your silver sword to hit them and do any damage. Now because you're using your silver sword, you can't put Hangman's Venom on it, so even though they are doing human slashing type damage, you can't have the right type of damage on the actual sword, so protective coating isn't active, and so the high damage that they do, you can't mitigate it like we would do normally. And this is why this is a really difficult fight, because even with the Aracast decoction, they will do a lot of damage with you, because protective coating won't be active whilst you're using the silver sword, because you can't have the right type of oil on it. So what you have to do is you have to fight them one at a time. If you're just fighting them normally and you're not bothered about the achievement, fight them one at a time, keep your distance, and when you're fighting the last couple of wraiths where they get harder and harder, make sure that you keep Quen up using rage management, and make sure that you save your Tony Owl and your Superior Maribor for later in the fight when you're fighting the later versions of the Spectres, so that you can keep your stamina and Quen up at all times. And I would recommend that the decoctions that we use are the Aracast, the Ekamara, and then either the Ancient Leshen, and use the Ancient Leshen plus Axii, as we've done in previous fights, which are essentially one-on-one, to boost your stamina regeneration for the rest of the fight, or use it with the Succubus decoction so that it builds up over the fight to a maximum of 30%. It's easier than using the Water Hag decoction because it can be quite tricky to keep your health up during this fight. So if you fight them one by one, use Rend, dodge back, and using the range on Severance, that really helps, so you can win that fight normally. But one of the things that I discovered, and I'm pretty pleased about this discovery actually, it was quite an interesting thing, I did it a few times to try and figure out why I was taking so much damage, is that you can use manual sword switching, and you can use a decoction which we don't use, haven't used to this point, which is the Griffin decoction. So we've got the Ekamara and the Aracast like normal, and keep the inventory as low as possible before the mission, but we're using the Griffin decoction, and what that does is, for every hit that you take in a battle, it increases your resistances by 1%. Now normally it's not much good because we kill things so quickly it doesn't matter, and we don't take that many hits. But what is useful for it in this fight is, you can use the steel sword and put Hangman's Venom on it, and take a lot of hits from the weaker versions of Olgierd's Shadow. And when you do that, it's building up the resistance for the rest of the fight by using the Griffin decoction. So you can take a bunch of hits from the less strong versions of Olgierd's Shadows, and that builds up the resistance with the Griffin decoction. So essentially, the maximum that the Griffin decoction can do is 25% for the fight. But essentially you're doing the same thing as having the protective coating, it's just you're fighting the weaker versions of it, and each hit is increasing your damage resistance by 1%. Now you don't have to use the manual sword switching. You can see here that as I do it, I'm using the version of the Zirael armor that has high slashing damage, and I'm just using my silver sword. So you can do it with the silver sword, it's just you take more damage whilst you're building up the resistance using the Griffin decoction, so you have to make sure that you heal yourself if you're doing that. So you can either use the manual sword switching, switch to the steel sword with Hangman's Venom, take a bunch of hits at the start of the fight so that the Griffin decoction builds up the resistances, and then switch to your silver sword. Or you can just use the silver sword, but just bear in mind you'll be taking more damage as you go until the resistance from the Griffin decoction builds up. So you have to be mindful of keeping yourself healed. So this is with Deathmarch and enemy upscaling on, as you could see from the menu when I was showing it just there. And you can wake up the other shadows and fight them all at once, and that will get you the achievement for fighting them all at once. So if you're feeling particularly masochistic, or like me, you're particularly stubborn, then this is how you would go about fighting all of the shadows on Deathmarch. And you can see, because the resistance is built up from the Griffin decoction, and we have that extra 25%, that essentially replaces protective coating, and we can use that as well. Now if your toxicity is low enough, you can, after it's worn off a little bit earlier in the fight, you can actually throw a bomb that will poison the enemies, and then the superior Devil's Puffball, and then you can use the superior Golden Oriole to stand in the cloud of poison, and that will heal you. So you can actually use heal from the superior Swallow and from the superior Golden Oriole as well. See there, I threw the bomb, but I didn't have enough toxicity to use the Golden Oriole, but that's how it would work usually. So then it's just business as usual. We've got the resistances up, we've got all of the Wraith triggered at once, and now we can make sure that we're holding the Silver Sword, and you can just use your normal Ekimara to heal as you're using Will, and take them all out at once, and you should be able to survive the fight pretty comfortably, and take them all out, and get the achievement that way. So that's it for Scenes from a Marriage. There's only one Hearts of Stone quest left, which is where we make our final decision on how we're going to finish the DLC, and then we'll be moving on to Blood and Wine. So thank you for watching, and we'll be back with the next installment shortly. Thank you.